Today I'm going to show you how to make the piece of wood on the left into the piece of wood on the right. Or in other words, how to make curved table legs from a piece of wood without producing any waste. I'm a traditional woodworker and I try to use primarily hand tools, but today I want to talk more about the concept rather than the tools used. So I'm going to be using a bandsaw, two bandsaws actually, to make these table legs. So let's get started. When you select your wood, the most important thing to check for is that your corners are straight. You don't want to have curved corners. This is going to be important later on. Then you take your wood and you want to make a template, especially if you're going to be making 4 legs, which I assume you will be. I want my legs to be sort of cabriole type, which is why I put this straight part at the top. Then I can make tenons or whatever for attaching them to the table. I then take some scissors and cut out the template. And I put it on the wood, and I trace the template on one side. I'll try and speed this up here so it's not quite as boring as watching me draw a line on a piece of wood. And after I do that, I flip it over and I use the template to draw a line on the adjacent side. This is important. You want it to be on adjacent sides, not the opposite side. Now, if you don't want symmetrical legs, you can always just draw freehand. The important thing is you need to have the line in the center of the wood, meaning don't have the line touch the corners, because you don't want to go outside the perimeter of the wood. But basically you can draw any shape you want. Your only limitation is the size of the radius you can cut with your bandsaw or your handsaw. Feel free to experiment, it's kind of fun actually. So after that I go over to a bandsaw with a thick blade and I make my straight cut on the top because I want the top of the leg to be as square as possible. If you're doing legs that are completely squiggly, then you don't have to worry about this step. Then I go over to my other scroll bandsaw and I cut out the legs, the rest of the curved portion. I've done 2 legs here, so it might be confusing. Then you tape the 2 halves back together. I try to use painter's tape just because it's easier to get off. But try and have the tape only on one side. If you put the tape on the side that you're going to be sliding the wood on to make the second cuts, it might get caught or not slide as well. After I've done this, I go back over to my bandsaw and I cut the other straight portion of the leg at the top. And again, if your legs are totally curved, you can just skip this part. Then I bring it over to my other bandsaw and I cut the rest of the curve like I did earlier. Again, I'm cutting 2 legs, so you'll see both get cut here, I think. Oh no, just one. My mistake. So now I have it cut twice on adjacent sides. I remove the tape, and this is where the magic happens. Now that you have 4 pieces, you take each of them and you rotate them 180 degrees so that the outside corners are now facing inside. And when you reassemble it, you will get your curved table leg. When I saw this for the first time, I was mind blown. It is such a cool way to make curved table legs without any waste. So after a quick rub down with some sandpaper on the corners, it's time to assemble. And this is where it can get a little bit tricky, but it's not that bad. What you want to do is glue up 2 pieces at a time. In other words, one side of the entire leg at one time. This ensures that the inner portion that you're going to be gluing together remains flat. You want to have those seams flat so that there's no space in the center of the leg basically after you've glued it all together. So now I have the clamps on 2 sides and I'm going to let that sit overnight, make sure it's good and tight. And then the next day I take the clamps off and now I'm going to glue these 2 sides to each other to complete the leg. Again, I've sped this up a little bit so that you don't have to sit through any tedious glue-ups. And again, I let this sit for another day or so just to make sure everything is nice and tight, because I will be shaping this. I put it in the vise, and then I use spoke shaves and some rasps and an assortment of files, etc., to start shaping the leg. And this is where you can really let your creativity take over. You have the initial shape, but you can do further shaping with these different tools. I decided to do very little, just because this is an instructional video, and I wanted to get through it, basically. So after my initial shaping, I just kind of curved off the corners. I used sandpaper, starting with very coarse grit, 60 in this case, and then progressively used finer sandpaper to smooth it all out. This is 120, and then I moved on to 240 to really give it a nice feel. The wood itself is not a hardwood, it's just pine, so there wasn't so much I could do, but this is the end result. This is the really curvy leg, as I like to call it, for lack of a better term. And then we have the other cabriole style leg. Now again, you could use a bandsaw to cut the ends even further and taper them to make it look even more like a traditional cabriole style leg. And if you use a close-grained hardwood instead of softwood like this, you can virtually make the seams disappear, as you can see here in a keyaki chess table that I made last year. Thanks for watching.